It tends to sit currently for organisations who are committed to putting menopause as a central support tool within their workplaces as a very passive piece. You get that menopause policy in place, you put it on your intranet, you do a piece of sort of familiarisation and onboarding around it, and then it's left to be passive. It's left for those women to come and tell their line managers or to come and tell you that they need help or they need to draw down on what that policy offers. Strategy starts with understanding where symptoms are showing up not as symptoms in careers. Delayed decisions, deal dilemmas, being less visible, and we know how detrimental to a career the lack of visibility is. Risk aversion or confidence, being able to just show up as who you were before. And what you're asking your women to do is to keep doing what they always did with an old toolbox, which is now defunct for new times.
Managing a global team is complex, but Deel makes it simpler with payroll, HR, IT, and compliance all in one place. That's why over 35,000 businesses trust Deel to hire, pay, and manage teams worldwide. See how Deel works at deel.com/NICKDAY. That's deel.com/nickday. Deel, your forever people platform. Hello and welcome back to the HR L&D podcast. I'm your host. My name is Nick Day. I'm the CEO at JGA Recruitment Group. We're specialist human resources recruiters with offices in the UK and the USA. So if you're struggling to recruit top HR talent, you know where to go. Of course, if you're a regular listener to this show, please do remember to click subscribe or follow us on your favorite video platform or audio platform. It's really important, though, if you can, to leave us a review, or in better, you can share this with your HR and L&D colleagues and friends. That way we can really raise the profile of the profession and make sure we get this content into as many ears and eyes as possible. And we want to do that because we've got a really important message today. In fact, really important content that, I will be very honest and transparent, has impacted me personally. So today I'm really excited because we're joined by Fiona McKay, who is an award-winning founder of the Menopause Maze. And she is on a mission. She's on a mission to stop the menopause from being sidelined as just a well-being topic. And instead, we want to reposition it as a strategic learning and development and performance priority. Now, Fiona has worked with a number of leading organizations to turn menopause into a leadership advantage. And we all know, listeners, with burnout, brain fog, and high potential women leaving the workforce in record numbers, I think this conversation is vital and couldn't be more timely. So without further ado, Fiona McKay, welcome to the HR L&D podcast to discuss a topic that is as close to my heart as I know it will be to many of my male and female listeners here. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Nick. And as you say, what a timely conversation to have, an important conversation, and a conversation that is only going to increase as the years go on and women continue to work for longer in their workplaces.
Absolutely couldn't agree more. But before we jump into the content, let me ask you my first question just to get the conversation moving with the question I ask all of my guests, which is this: what do the words human resources mean to you?
People. Just people. Good people. Developing people. It's about people.
Fine. I mean, that's a great place to start. We're going to talk about people today, but not just women. I know menopause sometimes we think is just impacting women. We're going to really help reframe menopause as a leadership issue today. So I've seen in your work and your great content, and there will be some links in the show notes I'm going to direct our traffic to today as well. But you've described menopause as one of the most overlooked strategic blind spots. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, it tends to sit currently for organisations who are committed to putting menopause as a central support tool within their workplaces as a very passive piece. So, for example, you will have a menopause policy or not. Well, let's go down the route of those who do. Okay, you've got a menopause policy. You get that menopause policy in place, you put it on your intranet, you do a piece of sort of familiarisation and onboarding around it. And then it's left to be passive. It's left for those women to come and tell their line managers or to come and tell you that they need help or they need to draw down on what that policy offers. And therefore, it's stalling. What it needs to be is really proactive and progressive, where we engage with those women at the get-go. wherever they are in their leadership journey. But our area and my area of expertise is very much in that leadership layer. So I'm going to really focus on the lens that I've, got real expertise in.
Sure.
Is I wonder, what do those women need? They don't need a fan. They might do, but they can put it on their own expenses, right? They're senior women. They can sign that off. They can ask somebody to do that for them. They don't necessarily need a note taker to, get good notes in their meetings. If they've got good EAs, they can talk to them about getting some really good tech and, greater support around how they actually get more structured notes out of meetings that they go into. These are very basic things. And at the moment, it's one line going across every layer in the organization. Strategy starts with understanding where symptoms are showing up not as symptoms in careers. Delayed decisions, deal dilemmas, being less visible. And we know how detrimental to a career the lack of visibility is. Risk aversion or confidence. Being able to just show up as who you were before. And what you're asking your women to do is to keep doing what they always did with an old toolbox, which is now defunct for new times. And that is my definition of where the difference is between passive symptoms to strategic positioning, and making this central to really understanding in the development of women what they actually need to continue their leadership careers as they move through all stages of menopause, because there are different stages along each of the way.
Sure. I mean, full transparency for our listeners, we have a menopause policy in our business at JJ Recruitment. We even have a menopause contact for people to go and speak to in confidence. And we feel like being quite proactive. And we set that up a few years ago.
Yeah.
But it was only when I started to experience the perimenopause myself through my partner that I really started to understand just what kind of impact it can have. And I'll be honest and said I was surprised, and I'm constantly learning. I'm trying to learn all the time to be the most supportive partner I can be in that situation. But it's challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have learned is there is not enough conversation around this. There's not enough knowledge sharing around the impact the menopause and the perimenopause, you said, at different stages can have. So I wanted to find out a bit more about why you think Wellbeing teams, L&D teams, HR teams, wherever the menopause sits in your organization in terms of that responsibility layer, why it's so important they really take ownership of the topic.
Well, if you don't, quite simply, women will leave. That's the bottom line, because when menopause happens naturally, so that's perimenopause to postmenopause, and that's usually mid-40s, 42 for perimenopause, and these are average ages, 51 for menopause, going through to postmenopause, early 60s for women. So you've got a big window there. And the reality of that situation is, if you don't start to understand what women need at these points along their career progression, they will leave or they will stall. And that's like the quiet stall. So they're in, but they're not progressing. They're stagnant. And then you're going back and wondering why your policy isn't panning out. Your pipeline isn't coming through. These are all of the joined up consequences, because when menopause arrives, it's a natural time in your life to start really looking at the next chapter. It's, your body is not able to reproduce anymore. That's the basic. That's what's happening. So there's a closure. And with that closure, there's a period of grief and transition. Some women are openly very upset about it, others are not. But fundamentally, something is stopping and something is starting. And part of that sits right through. And there's not one woman who I have met here and on the other side of the Atlantic, where our business is based in the US in New York, who hasn't said to me, I'm at this real career crossroads. I don't know. Am I in the right role? Am I in the right industry? Have I got it in me for the next 20 years to be doing this? Do I want to really fulfill my, unrequited ambitions? Have I failed myself? There's this real sort of career dilemma that goes on. HR, L&D, wellness, talent. get under that, start understanding what that looks like, because if you don't, they'll go and answer that question somewhere else with someone else who helps them answer it for them and with them.
I couldn't agree more. And one thing that's quite interesting here is we know, and I've spoken about this on pretty much every episode I've ever recorded, is that we are in a talent crisis, right? Companies are struggling to recruit, struggling to attract, struggling to retain top talent. And I would imagine that most of my listeners, because most listeners of this show are senior HR professionals, would, because it takes time often to get to that senior level of management, there's a high chance that a lot of this is going to be impacting all of our listeners, because typically, not always, but typically the menopause or perimenopause, we're going to impact you at that midlife moment in time. But as you say, it's that moment where actually there's many years ahead in terms of the work we can do at that crossroads, where maybe we've moved on from we're having children, so we can really focus on our careers. But there's a lot of myths and missteps and a lack of knowledge around the situation. So what are some of those big myths? What can we do to try and overcome them? And how can we start taking some proactive steps to move it forward, particularly for our listeners, that I'm sure this will be impacting many of them?
Oh yeah, there's a myth that women, once they hit menopause, their career ambition goes because their symptoms take over. I'm sorry, but that just isn't true. Their career ambitions are exactly the same. They haven't changed, but how it plays out, depending on how symptomatic they are, is almost like a game of chess. It's very strategic, and whatever moves in one place will have a consequence on the other. The other is that women will almost potentially think about retirement as their next career option. Are you kidding me? Absolutely no way. I mean, fundamentally, to your point, you hit your leadership stride. And if you're going to reach the board, if you're going to reach the C suite, the reality is it will be within your peri to postmenopausal years. So, thinking that we're going to be stepping back when you've spent all of your life building to this point, to step away. Now, some women will have to step away because their symptoms are so severe that they simply cannot function. And we can't get away from that. That is a cold, hard fact. So the statistics show us 25% of women, this is in the Western world, go through menopause with scant to no symptoms. 50% are symptomatic in some way, shape, or form, physical, psychological, emotional symptoms, from low to quite high. And then that remaining 25%, their symptoms are so severe, it affects all of their life for the rest of their life. Now, think about this. From an L&D, a talent, and an HR perspective, let's take out the 25% who are so badly symptomatic, right? We've got 50% here who are symptomatic. We've also got this other 25% that have no symptoms. And currently at the moment, you have an invisible filter on your talent development, and you're currently only promoting women who have no symptoms of menopause. They're the ones going through to the top.
It's like an invisible advantage.
It's an
Right?
invisible advantage. It's an invisible advantage. And if when you say that out loud, I know your listeners are going to go, we don't do that, do we? Really? We've not thought about it like that. Yeah, because that's what's being rewarded, right? Stamina,
So how do
pace, absolute unshakable ability to be the best that you can be. Now, we can't get away from the fact that a business demands that. There's some cold, hard realities here, especially if you're on a PLC board. If you've got the investment, the pension fund of, say, I don't know, the firefighters of Greater London invested in your business, and you can't perform to the best of your ability, or the city feels that there might be some wobble on that, is it unreasonable to ask if someone can perform at that level? So our job in HR and L&D is to equip those women with the tools to be able to navigate boardroom and leadership life to the best of their ability.
There's a lot to unpack there. If I'm gonna, my face looks, I'm trying to take all this in and reframe, I guess, what I'm learning in real time. All right. So there's a couple of things that come to mind. The first it must be very difficult for those that, well, obviously for the 25% that don't have the symptoms. If they're in senior roles, arguably they may or may not judge other women going through it differently because they don't have the same lived in experience. So that's, I was fine. So almost just get on with it because we're all women and I was okay. So you should be okay. When we now understand that's not necessarily the case. But also there's a potential then that we are potentially ignoring amazing future leaders who are really struggling with these symptoms and potentially promoting not necessarily the right people, just the people that aren't struggling. Would that be true? That makes sense?
Spot on. Spot on. Absolutely spot on. I mean, if your exec team had a leadership performance risk affecting 75% of it, as an L&D professional, you'd move heaven and earth to fix that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course you would. It's it's all kind of landing on me. I've got to try and take this. It's a significant issue.
And what happens if you've got a 50-50 board? If you've got a 50-50 board, 50% are women, 50% are men, and of those 50% of those women, 100% of them could at any one time be affected by menopause and will be in some way, shape, or form. So they're definitely going to be in the 75% camp. 25% of them might have no symptoms, but 75% will have something in some way, shape, or form. What happens if it all hits at the same point? We need much greater succession and support in place to give those women the strategic tools that they need that goes way beyond symptoms, but see how it actually shows up in their strategic leadership to be able to equip them to continue leading and living without limits. That's what we're currently putting on people is limits.
I can imagine. I do want to move it from awareness to action. What we do next, but something's just to come to my mind. And I don't know if there's an answer to this. Maybe you've done some research and there's some impact that you can share some figures with me. But we know we're trying to promote more gender balance on senior boards, right? We still know there's way out of proportion with men to women. Some of that will be down to old school, traditional, hierarchical command and control elements of business, and just not promoting women for misogynist reasons. I'm sorry, but that does exist in the workplace, whether we admit it or not. But I wonder as well how much of this potentially could be down to this midlife situation where, because of the menopause hits at the time where often you're going to be making those board level decisions. Do you think that is part of the impact as well, why there is still such an imbalance at the C-suite, particularly when you look at the top FTSE companies or top Fortune 500 companies? There's still quite a significant imbalance. I wondered if there's any stats around how the menopause could be impacting that imbalance, or has that analysis not been done yet?
No, to my mind and to my experience, I've not come across any substantive data which shows any kind of trends around that yet. What I will say is the research that we've done at the Menopause Maze, both sides of the Atlantic, for C-suite women and aspiring C, so that's C-1 to C-2, 73% of them said they would leave their current employer and go to a competitor if it provided them with a strategic menopause career coach.
Wow. Now that's pretty profound. Okay, so let's talk about that then. Let's go from awareness to action. If we don't, the companies are not going to want to lose that amazing talent, right? And it sounds like there is some strategic solutions that we can move towards to help overcome that retention problem, but if they're not really looking after their employees correctly. So obviously tell me a little bit more about Menopause Maze as well, but what can organizations do then to start strategically supporting their employees better? And I guess I want to ask you this question in a way that goes beyond the tick box, because a lot of organizations will go, hey, we run an e-learning module here and we tick the boxes and we've done our bit. But is that really moving the needle? I don't know. HR leaders. I'm Nick Day, host of this podcast, but also founder of JGA Recruitment Group. And here's what I hear every week from top HR leaders. They say, Nick, we can't find the talent. It's our biggest challenge. And when we do, we can't retain them. Well, that's where we come in. At JGA, we specialize in HR recruitment and only HR recruitment. From executive search assignments placing CHROs to contingency hires finding HR pros to global HR transformational contract placements and every people role in between. Across every vertical and at every single level, we know where the top people are, what motivates them, and most importantly, how to get them excited about your opportunity, even if they're not actively looking. With engagement rates over 90%, we don't rely on job boards. We rely on relationships. We place fast, we place right, and we do it in a way that reflects your brand, your values, and your goals. So if you're building a strategic HR function, please don't leave it to chance. Visit jjrecruitment.com or reach out to me directly and let's build the future of work together.
Well, all intent, I think, around menopause is really good intent. So let's not diminish any of the work around that. And I think, big shout out to HR professionals who've done what they can with contracting and limited budgets. And the challenge for HR and L&D is everybody's menopause journey is different. So trying to provide a solution that encapsulates and fits all is tricky. It's tricky. Data drives decisions. When we get good quantitative and qualitative data, we can start to see what moves the digit dial towards actions that we can track and actions that actually deliver results, not just in retention, not just in attraction, but in EBITDA, cold, hard P&L. And at the Menopause Maze, that's what we're all about. We're all about strategy and not focusing too much on the symptoms. So we've built the world's first data diagnostic for women and for workplaces to be able to track and understand where menopause is affecting leadership, career acceleration, leadership effectiveness, retention, attraction, and the greater growth of the business. It takes less than 5 minutes to take it. It's an online tool. And once you've done that, you get a really fantastic map readout, which for every organization that does it goes, ooh, okay, great. So now we know. Now we know the robustness of our policies. Now we know where our gaps are. Now, and this is built exclusively for the leadership layer coming up in organizations. And it's the tool that, HR and L&D do sit on a lot of really good data in organizations. And this is often the missing piece that can really bring that together and galvanize the next phase of menopause action. The first phase, which started around 5 to 6 years ago, we figure in the UK, was around awareness, but we're moving into action now. We've got menopausal women are the fastest growing workplace demographic on planet Earth. By 2030, there's going to be over 4 billion working women in the menopausal age. And you can do one of two things. You can either talk about it or you can tap into it. And that's a choice, right? That's a choice for every organization.
Or ignore it and lose your talent.
Exactly.
That's
yeah. And watch them go to your competitors.
Two challenges here that come to mind in the response you've given. Number one is getting the investment to create the change, which may be difficult if the board currently is made up of individuals that haven't experienced it, and that's unfair. You don't have to experience it to want to invest, but it can make the challenge harder to secure that investment. And there's a lot of investment to be secured across multiple different facets of HR. So everything is a priority, and that can be sometimes difficult potentially. So that's challenge number one that comes back from your response. Another challenge, and these are just the ones that come to my mind, I'm sure there are others our listeners are thinking about. The second one would be, you mentioned there that a menopause coach, I think you mentioned, could drastically improve retention for women going through the menopause. But I still believe there's probably a fear for women even admitting they're going through the menopause because of the fear of it may impact their ability to progress through the ranks. It may impact their relationships within the workforce. So whilst that might help them, how can we manage that transparency piece, or even that ability to say, hey, I need that support, but I don't want my C-suite to know I need that support, but they need to know. I think it's difficult because we need the awareness, but there's some people are going to be, and we know from experience, my experience, so I'm talking in as I think, that menopause or perimenopause can also impact anxiety and self-confidence. So that can make it even more difficult to want to go to someone and say, I need this support. So how do we navigate that?
Okay, and that's the very reason why we set up the Menopause Maze. So the Menopause Maze has two very distinct sides to it, B2B and D2C. So for those women who really do not want to go down any workplace sponsored route, they want it to be an investment of their own. They want their own strategic menopause career coach to help them grow their careers in the companies that they lead. They can work with us directly. They can work with me directly. And that's often what a lot of women want to do. They want it no different than having your own exec coach at C-suite. You often self-fund that because it's that separate, standalone, it's for you and it's for you alone. And the top 1% of any leaders always have top performance coaches. And this is just an element, an aspect of that. So that's one route for women. The other for workplaces is to say, okay, we can retain the menopause phase, for example, and if you would like to have your own coach, you can contact them directly because we have a relationship with them and they will be able to let you know how they can possibly help you. We sponsor X number of sessions or X program. We often build those specifically for organizations as well, but it's left up to the individual then to be able to reach out to us directly and find out to see whether it's something that would work for them. So that's a very nice sort of wrap-up way around it. It's there, but we're not going to force it on you. And for those who want to access it, it is discreet and it's confidential. Those two words are critical for women leaders.
Well, it sounds to me like it's an incredibly worthwhile and valuable investment for organizations because, as you say, losing top talent to your competitors over something that could be managed effectively with better support just seems like a crazy thing not to back. It doesn't seem to make sense to me.
And also, as well, in the wider context, I mean, we're looking at it through a menopause lens here, but let's broaden this out. You got to start looking at how you want to retain women, period, in your organization. And women have periods, women have pregnancy, women have menopause. So developing leadership development programs that don't flex in the very different aspects of life at work for women as against men is a fast track to failure because you're setting them up with a disadvantage because they're not going to go through often the same linear, quite straightforward route as men. And that's changing as men are taking time off for shared parental leave and other ways of caregiving around their children. But to think that we're having this sort of post-war lens of how we actually set people up for success in 2025 and beyond, and then we're wondering why it's not working. I think we've just got to get down to biology, business, and basics.
Yeah, I love that. I think also you make a good point around attraction because this isn't just relevant for people going through it now. We know that the new workforce coming in want to know they're going to feel supported later. And even if they're not in that workforce now, because we know that people chop and change jobs quicker, they still want to work for an employer, whether it's impacting them or not, that would support women that need it. Whether you actually need that, I know even as a man, I'd rather work for an organization that invested in their employees at every level and take their requirements, rather than an employer that didn't. Whether or not I need the menopause support or not, I still would rather work for an employer that gave that level of support because it tells you more about the employer, it tells you more about where they sit and what they're trying to do. So I think there's a little bit more to it there as well.
There is. And also, if you look at the behaviors and the characteristics of Gen Alpha, okay, so they're coming up. This is the YouTube generation, Nick. They expect information. They expect solutions. They demand development. They are the self-development generation, right? From literally the moment they landed on this earth. So if you want to tap in to that talent pool as it's coming through, these are the children of my generation who've seen their mums and their grandmothers and their friends and their colleagues start to open up about menopause, and they want to prepare and they want to make sure that there's no pauses in their careers and they want to be successful as they go through. So they're going to want to see the entry to exit point of development, and your failing if you think they're not going to be asked, those women are not going to be asking those questions now, because they really are.
I read a report recently that Gen Alpha, 86% of Gen Alphas would not join an employer whose company values did not align with their own. So, they are checking these things. It makes sense. I want to take it back slightly on creating that cultural safety and those learning pathways for organizations, because we haven't really talked yet about how many women are necessarily hiding their menopause symptoms at work. And therefore, what can L&D professionals listening to this do, and what role can they play in perhaps supporting them and changing that a little bit as well?
Well, you've talked about visibility. And one of
Yeah.
the things that can be really, really hard is to show up the way that you did prior to menopause if it's affecting, if you're starting to feel like a third rate version of your former self. You don't necessarily want to be on the same public stage that you used to before. So being able to provide self-learning development tools is really good for women that they can access on the go when they are able to access it. So on demand, that's really useful, really helpful. Upskilling managers is absolutely critical, because it's all about relationships, right? If you feel that you are in a trusting and supporting relationship with your manager, you should be able to say, you know what, I'm finding that my body clock is different than what it was before. I used to be super productive in the evenings and afternoons, but I'm finding now cognitively that I'm the sharpest in the morning. So if it's okay with you, can we do a little move around on my diary? These conversations cost nothing, and the outcomes are phenomenal and really cascade. But, it's great me sort of, showcasing that now. But in a
Yeah.
busy period with pressures and cost constraints and everything else, we know we don't work in ideal worlds, but equipping our managers to be able to explore some of the tools and techniques at their fingertips, which take nothing but just require a little bit of creative thinking, is the difference that can really make the difference. So they're just but 2 tips that I would give L&D to think about in terms of the what and the how for format of how they're developing their talent, both male and female.
So let's take that a level further. Then very quickly, we've got our listeners now. They're going to finish this episode when we get to the end. And what's the first action, proactive action they could take to help shift from reactive to proactive support? I know you mentioned we can have conversations, but let's make something that's more corporate wide that maybe they could do as soon as they finish this episode of the show.
Okay, so it's really simple. You go to the Menopause Maze website, www.themenopausemaze.com, and click on the No Pause Scorecard. Take the scorecard. It's currently complimentary to do, and find out what your score says. Number 1 action. Number 2, you haven't come this far and spent all these years developing a phenomenal pipeline of female talent, only to lose them at the very point they're about to take that next step. Start to look at the pipeline of development on what that looks like. And did you ask for a third point? Was it 1 or 2?
Oh, no, but give it. Please share away.
And the third point is, you are central. This isn't wellness wallpapering. You're central. You've got the data. This is about developing current and next generations of men and women. How are you going to do that? And then the fourth point is, have you got that silent filter on where you're only actually actively promoting 25% of women to leadership who show no menopause symptoms? And if you are, that requires, a deeper diagnostic of how you can link that up with talent solutions.
Sure. And as you said, that no pause scorecard at the moment is completely complimentary. You can access it straight through the link, which is going to be in the show notes of this episode. So as soon as you finish, or even while you're listening, you can click right through and find out more. I think the last question I want to finish with before we open HR and L&D Vault is that reminder. And I know this might be obvious to most people listening to this show. They do this for a living. But there is a really close link, not just between making your organization more menopause aware and supportive, but this clearly closely links with building truly inclusive, high performance cultures as well. And the reason I highlight that, having been trying to be a supportive husband and partner to my own partner who's going through this situation, is this impacts not just work, it impacts your relationships, it impacts your social connections, potentially outside of work and all these things. And we know if you're not happy at home, that can impact your productivity at work as well. So I think it's really important we have the conversation, not just about how we can impact people at work and be supportive, but that supportive nature you give at work could actually have a profound impact on relationships outside. My wife gave me an interesting stat, which I thought I'd raise, that 67% of divorces happen during that age that you mentioned earlier, when women hit that midlife piece. That's not to label any level of blame. It's just a standard of that's the statistic. And it was like, okay, I can understand it. That's really significant. So the more supportive we can help at work, that might just move the needle in other areas that extend beyond the workplace as well. So I wonder if we can just help link that towards building truly inclusive cultures for the people that might be listening to this that can actually influence that.
Absolutely, because if you're learning about how to be a more connected leader as a male leader, if you're learning how to be a more connected colleague as both a woman or a man, as an ally, as a woman going through menopause who hasn't had symptoms yet, as a female leader who perhaps has been very vocal about the challenge she had and how she moved through that, that cascades in your life, because then you come home and you've got friends and you've got partners and you've got people who you play sport with, and you share, my wife's having some real challenges around menopause. We did some work at our place, and we found that, I learned this, and you start to share those techniques and those insights, and they have a ripple effect, and that creates societal change, which means fundamentally there are two things that really stop women and workplaces moving forward. And that's shame, silence, and the third one is stigma. And if we can open those things up through the interventions that we provide through work, connected conversations, tools for new times, and really understanding what top women need and the leadership layer needs in order to progress way beyond just the outcomes of symptoms, we start to have different conversations which drive different decisions, which drive different actions, which drive different outcomes. So I think the cascading part of that can't be underestimated.
Yeah, I hope this episode serves as one of those ripples. I hope it starts the conversation. I hope it helps bring more awareness to the Menopause Maze and the wonderful work that you're doing. I hope it leads traffic to your No Pause Scorecard. I really do, because organizations can really improve some of the things that are really important to a P&L, which are attraction, retention, looking after onboarding, looking after your employees, well-being, all these things play into it. So I commend the work that you're doing. I'm so delighted you've joined me on the show to bring it to our awareness. And I'm learning as well. I'm sure our listeners are as well. And I thank you, Fiona McKay, for joining me for that. I'm going to open the HR L&D Vault. These are 3 short, sharp questions for our listeners. Just before we wrap up, they're quick fire questions. The first one is this. What is one book, podcast, or it could be a TEDx talk if you like, that you believe every L&D professional should read or watch?
I would say it's something that I appeared in. It's an article. Well, it was a booklet that The Guardian did on how to have a successful menopause, and it covers everything from lifestyle to sleep to food to medication. And I did the piece on careers. So that's the piece that I would recommend. And I can give you the link after that, and you can put that in the...
Give me a link. When you'll know if you want to know, I will make sure it's in the show notes of this episode. So if anyone wants to read that or find out more, it will be in the link of the show notes. So please do check these that. Fantastic. I'm glad we asked the question. What's the one thing you know now you wish you'd known when you started your career?
What people say and what people do are two different things entirely.
Great. Fantastic. I won't ask you to tell me more, but it's advice I'm sure will not be lost on many of our listeners. And if you could give one piece of advice to HR and L&D leaders about the future of learning and leadership, what would it be?
That it's not linear and it's different for men and women, and really understand what that means.
Yeah, fantastic. Fiona McKay, it's been an absolute, genuine pleasure having you on the show and for educating me, for leaving me with so many questions that I probably didn't articulate as well as I would have liked to, because I'm thinking and learning as we've gone through. But it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege. Please, if you're listening to this, go and check out the Menopause Maze. Go and get access to that completely complimentary, free, no pause scorecard diagnostic for your teams. And of course, all the other links we've talked about in the show will also be in the show notes. Fiona, thank you ever so much for joining me today on the HR L&D podcast.
Thank you, Nick.
Global teams are more connected than ever, but managing payroll, HR, and IT can still feel fragmented. Deel simplifies global work with one platform that keeps everything running smoothly. No compliance guesswork, no third-party payroll, just seamless operations backed by 24/7 expert support. That's why over 35,000 companies trust Deel to handle their global workforce. Visit deel.com/nickday to see how Deel can help. That's DEEL.com/NICKDAY. Deel, your forever people platform.